Hey, what's up, good people? Welcome back to another podcast of Sit Down Hawaii. I'm Josh, your host. It's our job to talk to people about meaningful conversations and ask questions and get you answers to things that matter to you most. Super excited today. My guest from Hawaii has a big heart, really, really smart, and I think we're going to learn a lot about transportation and what's going on in Oahu. My guest is John Nouchi. John, thank you so much for being here.
Aloha. Thanks for having me here today.
Yeah, brother, I'm so stoked. You came in and you were charged, and he was like, bro, I'm here. I'm alive.
Caffeine. I half caffeine, half me.
Have caffeine. That's good. We need people like you with caffeine. Let's just jump into it. Let's go into who you are, what you're doing, and why you're doing it.
Yeah. You know, I'm a transportation geek, transportation nerd, whatever you want to call it in the industry. I think we usually use nerd or geek because I love transportation. I love this idea that mobility is our key to good life. You know, and when I travel, the people that travel with me regularly, they know I'm going to drag them on what they call the busman's holiday. So I'm going to make them ride some kind of transit. We're going to have to use some other kind of form to get around. And generally, people will say, like, hey, that was way more enjoyable than I thought it was because it was frictionless.
Right.
And sometimes there is friction, but you could drive and have friction too, right?
Right.
Yeah, so people, I don't know. So I think my role is to get us to a place on this island where we de-frictionize getting around. Because I think we spend way too much time figuring out how we're going to get around. And you have these conversations with people and you don't realize how much space it takes in your head, right? Like going to pick somebody up at the airport. You got to think, what time is their flight coming in?
Right.
Am I going to get stuck in traffic both ways? And then you politely decline picking up somebody because you have to go H1 twice in the rush hour, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. And I think we don't think about if there's a better way, or maybe there's a better way that we just have forgotten about, or maybe we haven't discovered yet.
Right. So you're the Deputy Director, Department of Transportation Services, right? And that's so. Just can you, for anybody who doesn't know, and honestly, I didn't know, I had to do some research. What's the difference from Department of Transportation Services and then just like Department of Transportation? And I know you're with the city. Just so if you're out there, you know exactly what John does and how you can contact him for what,
Hey, that's a super good question because even my closest friends, they sometimes go, hey, you work DOT, huh? I'm like, no. There's a difference. Department of Transportation is a state level org here. They cover all the islands, the whole state. We have DTS, which is Department of Transportation Services. And I like to think that S sets us apart because we do provide a lot of services. But let me talk a little about what we do versus what we don't do. So we handle the planning and engineering and the design of complete streets. It's anything from sidewalk to sidewalk in the roadway. And complete streets is a philosophy where we are required by law now to consider all the treatments we can do to make our roadways and our sidewalks and our paths and the places that we go equitable amongst all users, whether you're a pedestrian, whether you're riding a bike, sized all the way through cars, mopeds, commercial vehicles, buses, big trucks. We want to make sure that everybody has an equal right to safety and accessibility on our sidewalks and roadways. So we do that. We also control on-street and off-street parking in the city, on city properties. And the largest part of our budget actually is public transportation. So what we broadly think about as mobility. And we have a new member to the mobility family. We've always had the bus and we've always had handy van. 2023, we welcomed Skyline in. Like after 55 years of trying, we got it through the goalpost. We opened the system. But over the past year, we've also taken on oversight of Biki Bike Share. So another pretty iconic piece of transportation mode on our island, on the city and county of Honolulu, which is the island of Oahu. So that's our responsibility in the city.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is that activation, right? Like, how do everyday people travel? And how does that work, right? What's the flow? Doing a lot of research, and you should do this as well. John spoke, he's been on the news, he's been on different podcasts, he's been on YouTube. I recommend you just look him up. And I want to touch this real quickly because sometimes we look at people who work in the city, in the state, and we don't see them as people. tell us a little bit about you. I know you're from Kaneohe, but I think it's worthwhile to talk a little bit about what got you here.
Yeah. I gotta say, I think had I not grown up in Ahui Manu in Kaneohe, my career trajectory might have been way different. I grew up on a street in Ahui Manu, like kind of near Valley of the Temples, and for some reason, our little neighborhood right there had a bus, and that bus used to come reliably up the street every hour. So if we were out playing in the street, we see the bus come up the street. You know, you could hear it. Back then, the bus was much older and rickety, and I don't know. Maybe in my head it was older, and we'd clear it away because safe, right? Get out of the street. The bus would drive by. The driver would wave at us, and that really is how we used to tick down the hours of the day, right? And the thing is that on one side of the family, like my Chinese side of the family, my popo and gongong, they didn't drive, and so I grew up with that, knowing that they lived in Kapahulu, and over the summers or whenever my popo was watching me, she would take me to Chinatown daily to go do the grocery shopping. So we would ride the bus and, do that trek through Waikiki, through town, into Chinatown, get off there, buy the stuff, and then go home.
Yeah.
And it was just, to me, I was a normal way of living. And so my mom and dad would also indulge me, and, we would go ride buses when we had time. And I think I've always had this deep down love for transit and just what it enabled. And maybe at the time when I was a kid, I don't think that I could have articulated that.
Sure.
But there is a certain freedom that we hear about from people who do use transit. And I think we've gotten to a point where people's perception of transit has definitely evolved, where they think that transit is a hindrance rather than an enabler. I actually think transit is a super force multiplier. Because if you don't need to have a car, you can get around without one. I think that's a whole bunch of expense, cost, and actually responsibility that you don't need to have anymore, a burden.
Yeah, I think we're gonna dive into that for sure. I guess because there's I posed the question out to social media and to the public. Gonna be interviewing you, and I don't know if there's this thought that everyone who works at the rail or everyone who's put these things together, they're so mainland. And, even my correspondence with you, and shout out to Travis and your team, I realized really quickly, like, no, these are local people that go through the same problems that most of us go through, right? Yeah. And I think that's really important that we have people from Hawaii for Hawaii, and it's something that we need to maybe be a little more mindful as we're talking out there and as we're talking about rail or Skyline. Yeah, I think it's something that we need to make a note of. Okay, so I'm excited about this section. It's called The Scoops.
Yeah.
So give us the scoops. What is going on? Where are we at with the rail? What are your thoughts?
Okay, so since June 30th, 2023, that was opening day of Skyline. We opened almost 11 miles, 10.8 miles and 9 stations between Kualaka'i East Kapolei Station out by the Kroc Center and Halava Aloha Stadium Station in Halava, where the current existing stadium is and where our future stadium will be. And, we opened that with a whole bunch of thought. We were very thoughtful about opening that first segment. And what it came down to is people have heard so much about how this rail operates, why it's different from other systems, why it's modern. And I think so much controversy swirled around it that opening moment was going to be more than just the fact that we could prove that we got it done. But it was a chance for everybody to touch and feel this controversial thing that they only heard about in concept, right? And while we knew that we were going to get some digs from people that say it doesn't do much, the thing that made me the most mad was or the thing that still makes me really mad is when people say, hey, why are you going to open 11 miles that goes from nowhere to nowhere? And the reason why that makes me mad is that's a very elitist view, because basically you calling everybody between Kapolei and Halava, you saying that they're nowhere. And when you tell somebody they're from nowhere, I feel like you telling them that they don't matter, that they're nobody.
Yeah.
And that's why that made me so mad. There are so many people in that area that we used to serve before Skyline on bus. And I think now we get to serve them a little bit better. And it really is like that that C&K song, right? Like the best is yet to come. We just wanted to open kind of proof of concept. And we needed to kind of flex a little bit too, right? Like we need to know that as a city, we had the necessary oversight to run a safe rail system. And it's not reinventing the wheel, but it is doing something that we've never done before. And it's pretty hard to do. I mean, we've learned a lot along the way.
Yeah, I think, and I want to get kind of more into the details of Kapolei to Aloha Stadium, and that is a very a lot of the questions that came to me for this was basically around that.
Yeah.
Right. I work in Honolulu. It doesn't even take me to the places that I work at.
Doesn't go far enough.
So
that was what we thought about as an item of risk. If we opened it, and what we did open it, but when we were thinking about whether we open this first segment at all, we said that's immediately what we're going to get blowback for. So I think we just acknowledged that. But we had to start someplace. We had to open something, right? Yeah. And, I think when we looked at this many, many, many years ago, when we were looking at stuff like environmental impact statements and things like that, there was a plan to open it as it was built, segment 1 through segment 4. And segment 1 would have been from, Kapolei to the edge of Waipahu. And I can't imagine now how opening that would have been viewed.
Well, you can go Tanioka's, I guess.
You could go to Tanioka's from Kapolei.
Yeah. From Croc to Tanioka's. I guess, there was some talk about budget and then also time. It just feels, and I shared the sentiment, like, okay, I thought it was going to be done sooner. Yeah. I think we're going on, 10, 11 years, and I remember voting for it. Yeah. And I'll give you just some background, right? I went to school in New York City, and I got to tell you, I love the subway system. Yeah. And it's really, really helped, right? You can go from anywhere, Upper West Side down to the Village in 12 minutes. And it just was, it was freeing. And you've even mentioned this prior in other things. It was very freeing. I could go anywhere I wanted to. Didn't need to worry about traffic. It was very easy to get around. So I think a lot of people bought into that and wanted that. But what do we tell people that it seems like it's forever, and it doesn't follow? A lot of people commented and said, this is not following the original plans. We didn't go far enough, or said we are going to do all these things and we're not there, and then it's over budget. We've had to ask for money multiple times. Yeah,
I can't dispute any of that. But on an island, it's hard to do stuff sometimes. And I think what we are striving for the future of Skyline, and actually our whole mobility system, whether you drive a car or whatever you do, bike, whatever, we want there to be fast, frequent freedom. Like, that's 3 Fs right there for people. That's what we want for people. We want everybody to use what we have out there to kind of make a difference in the different pieces of their day. Yeah. So when we think about it, I think the thing that people have complimented Skyline the most, other than the real local kind smell test about how clean it is and how attractive it is, people have commented about how frequent it is. And that was something that we really held to. Like, I knew even when we opened this first segment that, admittedly doesn't go far enough yet, but it will. And so people talk about that, like it doesn't go far enough as if it's never going to do it.
Yeah.
But maybe it shouldn't be a big secret. Maybe it's a small secret. But in about a year, we plan to open up another 5 miles and 4 stations to get us to the edge of Honolulu.
Yeah.
I'm trying to brand it as West Honolulu, but that hasn't been super successful in catching on.
West Honolulu?
Well, Kalihi.
Well, you always got like Kapalama South, and like maybe they
Midtown, Ala Moana.
There's all these different names, maybe. Just call them Kalihi, maybe.
No, and I think that's true, and like it's not shying away from Kalihi at all, because Kalihi, we had a summit in Kalihi where we invited, community organizations, kupuna, residents, businesses, into what we kind of saw as a real pico of Kalihi in Kapalama at the Honolulu Community College. And it was hard to get Kalihi residents to vocalize about what they thought the future of Kalihi was and how that was to be. And one of my goals is to make sure that, we don't bring something like Skyline into Kalihi and then it changes it in a way that is unacceptable to the people who are already here, already there in Kalihi, in that whole corridor, in that whole Ahupua'a. So, sorry, wandering a little bit.
It's okay.
And so it's very important to make sure that we retain all the good things about Kalihi. And as I sat down at that summit and participated in it, I was more, trying to facilitate, help people find their voice and make sure that they can communicate what they want clearly. Because I think, if there's one thing I recognize about Kalihi, I think that they strive for almost good enough. And I think part of our responsibility as government to help enable them to actually say, this is what we need, this is what we want, this is what we demand. So Kalihi 2.0, it doesn't need to be super far off from what Kalihi is now, but it should be better. It should be livable. It should be improved, And so that kind of helped them find their voice. And as I sat there and talked to them, I realized like a lot of the best things that happened to me in my life are based around Kalihi. And I've never lived in Kalihi, but, I used to dance for a halal that still is in Kalihi. My first real career job was working for the bus on Middle Street. I frequent all the good food in Kalihi.
Yeah, that's for sure. I guess so. That's. I mean, you bring up a good point because this is the same sentiment for Waipahu, right? So I live in Ho'opili. I'm right across from UH Oahu.
Yeah.
My wife and I, we bought specifically knowing we're really close to the rail.
Yeah.
Again, I bought in. I went to New York, so I know the strengths of what a rail could feel like. And our whole community, it's an asset for sure, right? All young, new. We're excited. We worked hard. Praise God, we got to get a home.
Yeah.
And maybe it's expensive everywhere. This was like West, but there was still an opportunity for this cool rail thing. But then so our community, I would say, most of my neighbors, when we talk about it, we're excited. Like, hurry up, get it to the airport at least, bro. Like, come on, like, park, get to the airport. It's gonna like really help. But
next year.
Okay, boom.
Next year.
Hold them to it.
And
not
just get you to the airport, get you in the airport.
There
are not that many transit systems that nail it on the first time.
Well, that's gonna be huge.
I don't think that there is. I mean, there are very few in the United States because you know what, the kind of coordination that it takes to have all the federal jurisdictions that oversee these projects. So it's it's one thing for us to shake hands with the other people we know in government, but when you have the Federal Transit Administration having to shake hands with the Federal Aviation Administration, and that kind of far off disconnect, that's what stops these big infrastructure projects from happening. So if there's one thing that happened correctly, you got it into the airport.
Yeah, I think...
And that's lost on a lot of people, I think.
Well, I think a lot of people are waiting for that, right?
The airport is going to be like the gateway drug to realizing that Skyline is there for them.
Yeah, and I guess it does bring different questions, right? So, like, for us, Ho'opili, we're excited. And I don't want to talk for everyone, but at least for my household.
Yeah.
But once it gets to Waipahu, and I have a lot of family there, they are the what Waipahu once was through plantation. We've been here for 50, 60 years. This is a whole different thing. And then I would put that even in the same space as Kalihi with some of the same type of demographic and ideas and ideals. And so I definitely think that with you thinking positive, and I kind of mentioned this, is the rail's here. It's up. The debate whether it should be up or not up, it's done.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's forward thinking or even positive thinking to say, well, we're gonna break it down now.
Yeah.
What did we just spent $1 gazillion and put 11 years of our lives through this traffic, the whole thing. So my take is more like, how do we move forward with this, and what does that look like? There was someone who brought up a question about it not going far enough, and I do want to get your take on this. UH West Oahu connecting to Manoa campus.
Definitely a goal.
It's a goal, and like, I guess what would it take, and like how long? Is this a 50-year project? Like, I'm not being facetious, but like, what does that look like?
20 to 30 years, I'd say. 20,
30 years.
But, and it sounds long, right? But I don't sit here thinking that, like, I look back on my short career in transportation, right? Where I've just focused on this stuff, right? I've been at it for 26, 27 years now. And I still think I'm 23 years old, which I am not.
24.
Maybe 24. yeah. Because that's when I started at the bus. And I think that, that's my formative moment, right? That's how old I was when I started. I don't feel that different. Maybe I sigh and grunt when I get out of chairs now, but I probably did that back then. You just heard my knee crack.
Yeah.
No, but I hear you talking about, one of the greatest feelings. You can imagine having invested maybe the last 15 or 16 years of my life working towards this and really going through a lot of feelings after we opened. I mean, the public's hate and vitriol was so much for me to stomach as my own person. Like, I'm a real person, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that once we opened Skyline, that we could take a breath and be like, yeah, we did it, and that people would maybe like stand down and just let us have a moment. And it got worse. Like, the society that kind of enveloped me after that, from the detractors, the people that hated on it, they did not want to be proved wrong.
Sure.
So I think just opening it they took it as an affront to them. Like, it was like a middle finger to them. Like, haha, we did it. But it just kind of made me realize how, like, sometimes we've really shifted into being kind of unkind. And, this is just me just wanting to do right for the place that I was born, for the place that I will die at, and it's like I said, a lot of feelings.
Yeah.
But the feeling that I had that was the strongest after we opened, and I talked about this with a lot of my colleagues at the city, was, I think the strongest feeling I had after that was hope. Rolling into that, it was a lot, right? But I left feeling, even after, somebody came and, like, pounded the table and swore at me,
Well.
And, that was happening more than I would like to admit.
Yeah.
And I think it's because I was on TV. I was doing the intros and I was the hype man, right? That people wanted to blame all the problems that Rail had over the years on me. And I'm just one guy who's trying to do what I think is best. And so I had to tell a whole bunch of people, like, I'm not your problem. The problem is all these other things that are aggrieving you. I'm trying to provide a solution. Can you work with me to provide a solution? What is that solution to you? What do you need, right? So to hear you talk about how you've chosen your home in Ho'opili and to know what's going on in that community, that it further bolsters that sense of hope that I have. Because, as somebody who lived in New York City, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
In one of the boroughs, it's minor right now, but you have stuff. You have a bodega. You have like an ethnic market. You got a Filipino market.
Yep.
You have an ice cream place. You have a neighborhood coffee place. And you know what? It is kind of far-flung and spread out, but that kind of stuff will densify, and then we'll get back to the things that make great communities and great places to live. Because I think the hill I'm willing to die on is that a mixed-use community where you can walk to things is a far better health and lifestyle outcome for us that I think we've lost control of, or we've lost sight of, And if you think of like the greatest neighborhoods that we consider now, and maybe if you use great, I don't know how you would define great, like the most, we can use rich, wealthiest, but I want to maybe get to valuable. Some of our most valuable communities are the ones that have that walkability, that have the corner store. I think about like where my popo and gongong used to live. There was like Stop and Shop Market, which is still there on Campbell Avenue. But you think about the whole Wailai neighborhood. Now, the thing that I think most people don't know, like people would definitely say Kaimuki. Definitely a desirable neighborhood right now. Even though small houses, small lots, small roads, but nobody ever says that mobility in Kaimuki is a challenge, right? And even Pololo, like that whole effect of what a good community is, that image of a good community is nested there. And why is that, right? And I would posit that, back in the day, how much time do we have on this podcast?
Well, I'm here until you got to go. So
No, we are solving the same problems that we had 100 years ago. And back in the day, before people had widespread availability of cars, so let's just say the early 1900s, right?
Cable cars or whatever that is.
Yeah, we had streetcars, right?
Sure, streetcars, yeah.
Why did we have transit in our city? That dates back to, you want to guess when?
1890.
Yeah, exactly. So dates back to that time frame, right? When we still had a monarchy.
That was a complete guess, by the way, bro. I'm not that smart.
No. We still had a monarchy, right? Yeah. And I think everybody believed that our monarchy was standing for what was best for the people. I think there was no wavering on that. Maybe there's some kibitzing in thought, but our monarchy even knew that we needed to innovate, right? So that's why we had electricity. We had all these other things, you know, we had electric light, we had plumbing, we had transit for people to get around. But now think about if there were no cars, how do people get around? Walk.
Horse, walk, yeah.
Horse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So our center of town, what I call the ground zero of our city, Honolulu, was at Merchant and Nu'uanu. Merchant because financial district, right? And that was where downtown was because it had close proximity to all the things that made money, the banks, the harbor, the cruise ships, those kinds of things. And that was like the 0 on our axis of significance in this city. And you can tell because I don't know why we split it north-south, but we did. But all the 0 addresses are at Nu'uanu Ave. And it goes all the way up the Pali. So if you look at all the signs, it'll say begin. So the numbers get bigger going away from the spine, which is Nu'uanu. And you have to think about no cars, right? People were only willing to maybe, just like now, right? People were only willing to walk about as far as they could in an hour. People, I don't think people now are very much different, but I'm sure they walk less, but people back then were willing to walk about an hour. And where does an hour get you? 3 miles.
From Nu'uanu? Yeah.
Yeah, like 3 miles an hour, right? So you basically went out to maybe Kalihi Moanalua, and then maybe out to like Pawa'a or up to Nu'uanu, right? So without the innovation of transit, our city would not have grown and developed. So all the things, the neighborhoods that we talk about, the rich neighborhoods, are developed because of transit. Yeah. And that was at a time when Nu'uanu was too far. They couldn't sell land in Dowsett Highlands for 17 cents a square foot because it was too far.
Wow.
People didn't have a way of getting there. So, we ended up, monarchies, our ali'i stood up 12 miles of streetcars in 4 years.
Wow.
But they didn't have a lot of the restrictions that we do now. They just did because they were in charge. And some of those land uses and routes are still the same. The first route we established is still Route 1. It still goes along the corridors that the streetcars plied back then. But to think about it, so we only had this radius of walkability around downtown, right? And we had an affordable housing crisis. All the people that needed to be downtown, like all the working people.
Yeah.
You think about all the forces that conspired right at the turn of the century, right? We had a fire in Chinatown. Imagine a whole swath of affordable housing just got decimated, right? So we needed places for people to go. We needed places for people to live. So we built transit out along Waialae Avenue. And if you look, even the land use, like that's the one place in Kaimuki where we have numbered avenues.
Yeah, true.
And we have a grid. And the grid cares not about what the hills look like.
Yeah, it's just there. Yeah.
That's why we have that super good fun hill on Kilauea Avenue. It's a roller coaster, right? But we put transit out there. We had what is now our Route 1 and our Route 3 still along many of the same alignments. And that enabled people to go to affordable housing in Kaimuki. That was the answer to our first affordability crisis back in 1920. So here we are 100 years later. We're doing the same with Skyline. We're taking Skyline out to Ho'opili, out to places that can be more affordable. But we're affording people reasonable, what did I say earlier, fast, frequent freedom to get there. We're not putting you out in Ho'opili and then saying, well, it's going to take you 2 hours to drive on some days. Some days it'll be an hour.
Right. I think you hit a really good point as progression and technology. The more that we invest into that, the better it is for everyone. I think that's a thought most people would probably agree with, right? That unless you're like, hey, let's go back and I want to, maybe take a step back in technology. It's a whole nother kind of claim. But I think some of the pushback, and I want to get into the numbers, is how do we, for the amount of money for operations, and then also how do we make it affordable, right? Because you got extreme operation costs. Let's just say it's a lot. And I have the numbers here, so I do know them, right? But also the average person to use it, it just feels like it's a lot for a little bit of people at the moment present.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I don't want to really harp on that. I do, however, want to talk a little bit about creative solutions. I remember when the rail was just being kind of, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to vote for this. There was this kind of thought that we would be able to help offset some of these operation costs on creative businesses. And please correct me if I'm wrong or right, but New York City, you go in down the subway, there's access to grocery stores, small markets. You got little cafes, and that it's kind of been talked about somewhat. So I kind of want to know, like, what's your thoughts on that? Is that something we're looking at doing? I could see an idea of like, get on the rail. You know, I got to get some groceries. We got all of these farms, and we want these initiatives and the health. Like, why not spend more time with developing some of the commerce around the area within the rail system itself? And yeah, how can we do that? Is that possible?
I don't think we need to talk about it as exclusive. We're not doing this or that. So, of course, the more vital business opportunities we can excite around the stations, that's all the better for not only just general land use and livability, but it's good for the people that use our stations, the people that frequent these places, right?
Right.
And you know what's funny is the very same things that people love when they travel and they go to other places. For some reason, they come home and then they put on this cloak of impossibility, I call it. Like they're like, oh yeah, I'll use trains in Japan, but I'm not gonna use them at home. Why?
Yeah.
Because you know what? I mean, I know the answer. Why?
Sure.
Because we haven't invested that same level of thought and imagination and convenience into what people do. Like, it is never hard to get a drink. If I need a tea in Japan, I can choose any of 6 convenience stores on that block. And I'm not saying we need to get to that point.
Right.
But we need to, like I said, I talked about Ho'opili. You have your market, you have your ice cream place, you have your coffee place. But it's all not, I mean, you have to go out of your way right now, right? So we need to densify that small business presence. And with that, we need to enable as a city to be more friendly to these kinds of opportunities.
Is that something that we are looking at and actually actively thinking of? And I want to be more specific. Like, would we be able, let's just say the station at Tanioka's, for instance, like right there. And is there in the plans, or are there any thoughts where we would be able to put integration of up on the top? You go up the stairs and there's an actual like bodegas or things that's like more for the community.
Absolutely. And that's the thing that we've been trying to fix. But again, you know, everything kind of has to be in a sense of stasis, and you have to do it at the right time, right? So right now, we're not carrying enough people that I think that kind of business opportunity would be profitable. But if you move us forward about 5 years, we plan for that spectrum where we have more people, then that kind of concession or that kind of business opportunity becomes a little bit better. Now, timing, huge. The reason, you know, all the delays that we've had in constructing rail in Honolulu, it's had a pretty chilling effect on some of the things that actually I'm talking about, livability, right? People want to do transit-oriented development. And actually, that term TOD, people are familiar with it, but I actually like to say equitable transit-oriented communities. Because I think people here get a little bit weird about the word development. It has a specter. It has a negativity about it, right? But we want to build communities. And some of these places, they've done the right thing by densifying. But I think where they've fallen short is because we don't have the transit there yet. We don't have the people. We don't have, you know, the vitality yet. They're building buildings that have huge parking podiums on it. And that also affects the sense of place. Like, you don't want to walk down a sidewalk. You want to have things. You want to have a nice walk. You want to walk through things. You don't want to have 11 stories of parking right next to you. So it's all like offsetting each other, right?
Right. I guess, so that's a good point. You know, so my background, I have a few businesses, and there's one thing that, you know, before coming into here, I kept thinking, wow, what makes New York or Boston or Japan, England? There's a lot of different. England. There's a bunch of places that use rail, and you know, we look at alternative. We call it alternative ways of transportation. And in your opinion, because I have my kind of take on this, but alternative implies that it's a choice that's just almost
it's the other.
Yeah, exactly. And like in New York, it's not the other.
No.
And I'll give you an example. The bus.
Yeah.
It's not an alternative transportation. It's baked in. When there's people who go, I catch the bus, that's my first and foremost way of transport. Right now, I have one friend, good friend. He works at the Pearl Harbor. He's at the
Yeah.
shipyard.
Yeah.
And he's like, bro, this is perfect for me. But I asked him, I said, how many people? He said, there's not a lot of people on there, bro. But he's there. That's his number one form of transportation. And he bikes.
Yeah.
So he bikes from there. And, how do we get people? Because there's a bigger psychological thing going on here. We're habitual people.
Yeah.
So the habit in New York City is wake up,
it's hard.
go get to the subway, and that's that.
It's hard getting anybody to adopt new habits, right?
Right.
And so part of that is, I like to think about it as, part of adopting a new habit is dropping one excuse from your routine. So we talk to people especially let's use that. We do have a very dedicated ridership base that comes out of our shipyard, and we know who they are, right? And that's kind of the best part. We're at a place right now. So over the course of this 1 year, or a little over a year, maybe a year and a half, we've actually grown the ridership of Skyline to by about 1,000 from its initial average of about 3,500. Now we're kind of settling more around the 4,500 area.
Right.
So there are people who really have grown to rely on it, and I think it's also for that shipyard crowd, right? I think for them, it's people who decided, I'm going to try this, and this was pretty good.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, it does skip the worst part of the commute on each one for them, right? And I love if you take recently I took every Wednesday, so maybe this is a secret thing, but it shouldn't be. I am a member of the Naulu Winds of the University of West Oahu's concert band.
Nice.
We practice in Pearl City every Wednesday. So, on Wednesdays, I need to get out to Pearl City. And I can actually take an express bus that goes from town and just drops me off near Pearl City. But it's often faster for me to take a bus to Halava than just go 3 stops. And, 3 stops. And then take a circulator bus. And that feeling of just constantly being in motion, I think it changes your view of your commute. And there was even one time, Councilmember Talba had a meeting out in Evo Beach. And I'm not gonna lie, when I thought about the idea, I was like, I gotta go out to Evo Beach. This is not my commute, right? So I don't own that. But to me, I may as well have been trying to swim to California. In my head, right? It was that big.
Right.
But like I said, we spend too much time thinking about how we're getting places. But you know what I did? I took a bus. It went on the freeway. I got off at Pro Ridge, got on Skyline. I got off at Westlock, got on another bus. I beat everybody. And I didn't think about it. It felt seamless. It felt that defrictionized, that I talked about earlier. And it's basically getting people to put down their just like I said, one excuse. People are like, well, it doesn't go where I need to go. I'm like, okay, well, are you sure about that? Because if it isn't, nothing I do is going to change that. I'm not going to build a spur that goes to your house, right? But can I help you better understand how you can access it for the worst part of your journey?
Yeah.
And I think that's where I want to talk to people about this, right?
Yeah.
You might see it as one line, but it is one line that's attached to 120 other bus routes. Well, maybe not all of them, but a network of that many routes that come together that might be able to efficiently get you to where you're going to go. And what I'm a little bit worried about, what keeps me up at night now, is I think before the pandemic, we used to have a lot more riders on the bus, and a lot more of those riders were choice riders. In that, when we surveyed them, they said, I have a car or somebody can help me complete this trip, but I still choose to use the bus. And then we had to go into this mode where we were draconian, and we said, during the pandemic, please limit your bus riding to essential rides only for essential workers. And if you weren't in that group, maybe they got a car, and then we're not going to get them back until that car goes kaput. And people here tend to keep their cars for a very long time.
Oh, yeah, buy new cars.
Old banger, or they just keep it and get a new car, right? So not that we did ourselves a disservice, but people have now started to see the bus as a barrier to entry to our public transportation system. I think they still remember it fondly. And a lot of people will come up to me who are against rail, against the fact that we're doing it, and go, yeah, I used to ride the bus. Don't say I'm against transit.
Right.
Used to is not the same as do.
Yeah. I think that lends itself, because I'm in the same line. So I did theater out in Castle
Yeah.
I went to Kapolei High School, and there was nothing went over H3. So I'd catch the bus after Kapolei High School. I'd go from Kapolei to town.
Yep.
Then I'd catch, I think it was the 55 or the 56 to Castle.
And it would take the real back roads all the way
Yeah,
through.
but it was like a 2-hour thing.
We got a better
you know?
route for you now.
Well, that's what I hear. Yeah, yeah, thank God now,
Yeah.
20-something years later. But and it was there and then back.
Yep.
And I was dedicated. I was in high school. I didn't have my license yet, and so that was something, and I'm very thankful, really grateful that it actually allowed me that opportunity.
That's how badly you wanted to do theater, though.
Yeah, and I loved shout out to CPAC and Castle, and it was such a good program with Karen Meyer and Mr. Bright that
You're a bright kid.
Much love. It just had what was super interesting to me, and it ultimately led me to New York City. But I think the thought is, if I want to just simplify it, we're habitual. You wake up, you live in Nanakuli, you live in Kapolei, you live on the west side because the rail is on the west side, and you get in your car. In my mind, could we not be doing more creative incentives to getting riders on? I'll give you an example. And maybe you're doing this or maybe not, because I don't know. Yeah. Kama'aina Fridays, take the rail, try it on us for a month. Another opportunity is, like, in my mind, we could be stipending or giving tax breaks to businesses in the areas where there is rail, where they would promote their employees. Hey, you know what? Catch the rail. And then they get, some sort of incentive. We use the business structure, because when I think about the businesses I run and own and all my friends, I would, if it's going to promote health, if it's going to take a headache of driving in traffic, and I would much rather look at those things, because in my opinion, the way to break the habit of mom driving a car, dad driving a car, 2 cars on the road through traffic, is we've got to get creative and incentivize breaking that habit once or twice. What can we do around that?
So we do have a bunch of programs in place, and admittedly, I think we need to get those out there. They're more suited for the larger employees, and we found that a lot of the larger employees, like Queens Hospital, the healthcare systems, the hotels that have the service industry workers that are very, as we just proved out, are very valuable to the well-being of our economy, right? Those were the essential workers we talked about during pandemic, but here they are. They're still essential.
Right.
So a lot of them they're covered under a program where either their employee pays for their transit or subsidizes a part of it, and they take it as a pre-tax benefit. And so that's available to larger corporations. But to your point, we could do a lot more with smaller businesses. And we can do that. It's just, we have to figure out how to get the cost of that benefit out there. Because if you think about it, I think our last study was that the annual cost of owning and insuring and covering maintenance for an average vehicle is over 10 grand.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
With our roads?
Yeah. And it's not just a road thing. That's just what it is, right? And we just have to take care of it. And people think that, they're buying the car for freedom, but it's kind of shackling another monthly bill.
Right.
To what you do. So I think people have come at me and said, well, you want to take away my car. I'm like, no, I don't want to take away your car, but I want you to give you the option that if you have 2 cars for 2 people, maybe you need 1 car for 2 people. And there's some coordination that goes with that. And there are people who, in their course of their jobs, will never be able to get rid of their car. And I'm absolutely okay with that.
Right.
But I think it's just, again, letting down your one excuse to why you will never use it.
Yeah.
Like, put down your absolutes. Don't say never. Don't say always. But think about a time when you might use it. And if it's useful for you then, if it's there for you then, we're in business, right?
Right.
And I think to that point, we do have to teach people the way, to show people that this is an incentive, right? And we do have programs with transportation demand management that will have, further commuter challenges and stuff like that. And what I think was super interesting is we did something, there was a nationwide thing called Week Without Driving.
I saw that.
And
I saw it. Was awesome.
The thing is like, I feel funny doing it because I don't own a car. So I don't drive anyway.
Right.
So, I have no problems putting myself out there. And like, I got so much social media blowback, like random people messaging me like, you don't even use the damn system. And like people are posting that about me. And I was like, I usually try not to take things personally, but that felt like a shot across the bow.
Right.
So this one person posted on our thing, and I felt like, you know what? Sometimes if I go in with my own personal social media and I go represent something, it just creates more like
Yeah.
crossfire, right?
Sure.
But I felt like
Gotcha.
at that time I wanted to let them know. So I just put, hey, in the last year, I tapped my holo card 906 times. So don't tell me I don't use this. And you know what? That's how I learn about what works in our system and what doesn't work in our system. And that's only the places that I go. Imagine the places that I don't go.
Right.
We need that understanding, right? We need to know how these things work. And I don't ever want someone to tell me, I don't mind somebody telling me that, oh, you did this because you don't know. Then help educate me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think and you bring up a good point, right? People coming to you, yelling at you, banging on your desk, and this podcast we promote respect.
Yeah.
You may not have to, and I've said this in every podcast. I'll say it again. That you don't need to agree with anyone's stance, but we can operate with respect, whether you are 100% on board with what John's saying or not, or even what I'm saying. The goal here is to move Hawaii forward.
Right.
Because if we continue to bring each other down, we're leaving a Hawaii for our kids that's not conducive to growth or positivity. And it's the whole reason, it's the whole crux as to why we're doing this podcast, is to show people that you're human, to show that we do have a direction. I have maybe one more thought. We're going to take a quick break, but as we're on rail, I see things that we're spending money, and we're going to get kind of into bus and bike and all that stuff. But, I see we're putting a lot of money into all these new electric buses, right? And let's just say that's a green initiative, right? And I don't remember how much, hundreds of thousands of dollars into the upgrades. And in my mind, I keep thinking, man, at that kind of price, if we could just get a quarter of the cars off the road, we would probably be greener as a state, and we could reallocate that money towards holo cards, getting people on there, getting them to try, again, more incentivization, more opportunity. I just wonder, from your point of view, and I kind of want to address this, the money that's being spent on rail, and then the money, if you see across just transportation, whether it's bike lanes or roads or engineering, or in this case, making things electric. What I guess the question is it well spent, and is it in the right spaces? I don't know. So I'm asking, what is your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where we talk about friction. I think that's where we get the most friction for people. Comparatively, in their heads, your average citizen is not going to worry about what a city budget or what a state budget looks like. They're just going to see all the zeros that come after it. And immediately they're going to think, oh, you know what we should have done?
Of course.
That
would have been better.
You get that friend, right? After you already made the mistake. Oh, you're that guy.
No, I'm not. But
hey, you know what would be better? Or hey, you should have asked me.
Yeah.
After the fact, when you cannot
planned.
change, right? Yeah. Everybody has that friend. But I'm not saying that that's wrong, but I think people don't have a basic understanding of we have monies that we use for something, can't be used for something else.
Yeah.
And that's true with the things that we do with our transit system. It's true with the things we do with Hart does with building Skyline. It's true with bike lanes and other improvements we do on our roadways. And it's a real easy place to go. I understand it. But it's a fallacy that, if we didn't spend this, we should just take all this money away from rail, and then we should put it into something that's more benevolent, like education. I absolutely support more funding of education. Right. But those two monies are not interchangeable. Like, we delete this, we not gonna do that, right? And it's not possible that way. But I hate, again, and maybe this is kind of like that Kalihi syndrome that I worry about. People think, what if we gotta delete this to get this? Like, is there not a scenario where we imagine that we could have both? Right? And one thing feeds the other, right? And I think people don't think about transportation as a necessary good. We think of other things as necessary good. Power, water, internet. How you get around is a huge deal. And then I don't think we think enough about the funding mechanisms for that. And so maybe that's part of it too, is educating people, but nobody wants to hear about how expensive things are, right?
Right.
We all know that, right? And people say, well, we should have just built another highway. We should have just built a road. And then we don't have to deal with operations costs. I'm like, oh, no, wait. It takes money to operate a roadway. And
course.
evidenced by how much you complain about
Yeah.
how many potholes are on that road.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So don't say that this is better than this, right? And we do talk about how much the capital of rail costs, but silently, let's just say over the course of many years, I'd say decades, our transit budget has been, just for easy math, it's been over $250 million annually to operate the bus and the handy van,
Right.
right? So you come across $1 billion pretty quick,
Right.
right? 4 years, we've spent $1 billion on transit. So let's just say that's gone on for 30 or 40 years or more, right? The
Right.
whole history of the bus as a municipal operation. We've overspent what we've invested on rail. And when people say, oh yeah, rail costs so much to operate, I ask them, how much do you think it costs to operate? And they don't really know, right? And then I say, well, do you know how much the rest of the system costs to operate? No, but yet they'll like fight to the death for how good the bus is.
Right.
They won't use it,
Right.
but they'll fight for the quality and the reputation of it.
Yeah.
Because again, it's not about, if for most people now, it's divisive, right? You choose one, I cannot support the other thing.
Right.
Not we should support inclusively everything.
I think it's more of a comparatively, right? So I have the numbers here, right?
Yeah.
Of the bus is $311 million in 2024, right?
Yeah.
And that was the operation budget. And then the Skyline, we're looking at 85, so substantially less.
Yeah.
However, when we look at how many people are using the bus compared to who's using the rail, it's per person per ridership. It's astronomically different, right? And I'm more one of I'll give the benefit of the doubt because in due time, it should ideally get to a point where it makes sense.
And it will.
You don't start something like off the bat and everything's perfect. And I'm willing to give that grace.
Yep.
Because I do read, I do know the numbers, and I am spending time. I think some of the pushbacks are always just, it is hard. And again, from Ho'opili's perspective, I'm walking with my son,
Yep.
and I look up and it's empty.
Yep.
You see a couple people, and
But you know why it's empty?
why?
Because you live near the end of the line.
Maybe.
People tell that
Hey,
to
that's-
me
maybe.
all the time about
That's
the
a good
bus.
point. Okay,
Like,
I
they're like, hey,
don't
the bus. Why
think
you on
I've
the
ever-
bus? Why you on the bus so much into this neighborhood? Like it's empty. I see it go by. It's empty. I'm like, you live near the end of the line. This bus does many
that's a
things
good
before
point.
it gets to you.
Actually, I want to pose that.
Yeah.
If you ride the rail right now, put in your comment. Let me know when it's busiest, because I think that's really important to do. Because most of the people in my neighborhood, but
Yeah.
you're right, we're at the end, so that might make sense.
So I really do like that the decision point. Like I call it meow meowing. Like the people just are kind of meowing at things that maybe some of it is based in fact and some of it isn't, right? I like the fact that the meow meowing is changing into like, this is dumb, tear it down. There's still some of that. But
I heard the other day just put a farmer's market on it the whole time, and I was like,
Yeah.
wow, that's interesting. Above ground.
or
farmer's
people
market.
like put cars and buses on it. I'm like, that thing is not wide enough
Yeah.
to. Anyway, there's so many reasons why all those ideas don't work.
Yeah.
Right? Somebody even talked about the High Line in New York. Do that. I'm like,
walk and put.
it would be much
plants and-
safer. I'm like, so you want people to walk like
Sure.
a mile or so without any way of getting down or getting up there? Like, I mean, anyway.
Yeah.
So there's just many reasons. Like, I'm not gonna address every single. I'm not gonna. Well, maybe I should. Maybe I should just do a whole day of myth
That
busting, and then
that
sit
might help.
in the booth and
That
then
might
be
help.
like, "My name is John. Ask me anything."
That
You know.
I think clarity is important.
But you
Yeah.
know what? Though the people that are gonna ask those questions don't want to hear the answers.
Sure.
They want to make their issue known. And there's, I think, a rare breed of people that ask questions, and that's why I'm really thankful for you having this podcast to actually put some reasonable information out there. And so, the conversation is changing a little bit about this is dumb. You guys are dumb. Tear it down. Put an end to all of this. To like, oh, you guys are dumb. How come it doesn't run late? How come it ends
Yeah.
so early? I'm like, okay. Double-edged sword. If you say it's empty, that nobody rides it, when
Right.
4,500 people ride it a day, I got many buses that do far less than that, but we still provide a service.
Yep.
We are a government service. We're there for people. We're not in it to make money.
Yep.
We will not make money on this. And I think that's where people, like I've gone to other podcasts where they ask me, when do you expect to turn a profit on this? Never.
Well, I can do the numbers right now.
Never.
Per person, it's
But when have we
$54
turned
per
the
person.
last time we
bus,
turned
no
a
way.
profit on bus was when it was a private industry and we
Yeah.
didn't run service that wasn't,
Yeah.
like feasible. But The conversation is changing, and people are like, it should run later. 100% agree, and it will run later in a year. We're negotiating that right now. It looks like we're gonna get, maybe 20 hours out of the day it'll be running, which is super important when
That's
it's going
huge.
to the
That's
shipyard and
huge. Yeah.
going to
Airport.
the airport and
Yeah.
other things. And even I got a lot of, interestingly enough, so a lot of my friends who work for the bus, who either operate or maintain the bus, they saw rail as kind of like a divisive thing. Like, this is another mode coming to compete. No. It's one system
Yeah, sure.
used for all of its benefits put together, right?
Right.
So now they're starting to kind of think and go, hey, am I going to be able to catch this to work? It's hard for them, right? Because they have
Right.
to be there before most people are going someplace.
Right.
So yes, we're gonna start much earlier. We're gonna end much later. We're gonna have extended hours on Friday and Saturday, and those things will make a difference. And I love being able to answer people's questions in those positive sense. Like, yeah, like instead of, hey, you guys are dumb. How come it ends at 7? Who can do that? And I'm like, you know what? You're right. So that's why our plan has always been that when we get more places that require more service, we will bump up the hours. And so
Yeah, I think there's a lack of education in that era.
yeah.
It's really important. Let's take a quick break, but I do want to kind of end on this. It was taught to me that if we want to fight poverty, the top two things that we can give people is communication and transportation. Communication in the ability to learning, to getting education, to being able to see, to hear, to be able to communicate outside of our spheres is phenomenal. So what it does is it allows our brain and our mind to think and to grow. Transportation allows us physically to get from one space to the other. And so I want to pose this question. This is something just as you're listening, and I would love for you to just think about it, and I'm sure you have, is as we continue to figure out, as you are, department transportation, services, the key of services, almost as an activation, getting people to use our public transportation. This isn't so much a problem around transportation as it is the opportunity to get people out of poverty. And if we can get our mind Hawaii around this, then we should be paying way more attention, and we should be trying our best in whatever we can to be utilizing these services, because we as Hawaii will move forward. Yeah.
So funny. I mean, not funny. I mean, very smartly you bring that up. And there was a much touted NYU study from maybe about 10 years ago that the single greatest factor to helping people escape generational poverty is availability of transportation. And that rated transportation above things that are super formative, like 2-parent households.
Wow.
The educational opportunities, present in their neighborhood, all those things that you think are very important to growing up and escaping poverty. Transportation actually ranked first. And I guess it comes with the saying that if you can't get there, you have to be physically present for an education. And I know there's remote learning opportunities, but
Sure.
you cannot, I don't think you can substitute being there for an education, right? And I think if you look at it, that's why a lot of people choose to go elsewhere or stay home. I mean, whatever choice they make for
Right.
higher education, it's that presence, experiencing something new. And again, my career trajectory might not be the same if I did not go to school in Los Angeles. And I went to Los Angeles at a very interesting time.
Well, you went to USC. It's kind of ghetto over there.
We'll see, but that's what you think. That's a perception. It's not.
When I visited, I went through the neighborhood.
It
I
was
like,
when I was
this?
there. But is that any worse than any other city in the U.S.?
Sorry, brother. UCLA is gorgeous and safe.
Okay, but
From what I saw.
actually think that that's fairly elitist because UCLA is in Beverly Hills.
Yeah, but yeah. I'll
USC
give you that.
never abandoned the central city, and they could have. USC
That's
could have
true.
moved to Pepperdine out in Malibu. We could have had that privileged existence, but we stayed rooted in the city. But my point is that I started there right after the Rodney King riots.
Oh, wow.
So LA was not going to be any worse than it was at that time.
Sure.
And I had a super interesting conversation with not only my USC friends, but we think that maybe cities in general in the 90s were coming out of, racial tensions and race riots and feelings that kind of started in the 60s and 70s, such that infrastructure maybe wasn't really that well taken care of in the 90s. So our film version in our head of the 90s, infrastructure was not like the most beautiful thing.
Sure.
And if I look at USC now, I mean, they have extended their campus in the downtown area. It looks like Europe. It's beautiful now, and it's safe compared to what I went through. And I never felt unsafe there, honestly. I just never did. And I think people like to always try to down USC with that reputation. But point being is that I saw what that city was like right when they had just started their first light rail line, which is now the longest light rail line in the world.
Oh,
It
really?
actually stretches from Long Beach all the way out into the valley in Azusa. And they had just started a subway downtown that was, it only went 5 stations in downtown, and it just barely left downtown.
Right.
And everybody in LA was like, what the hell is this about?
Right.
Because it didn't go far enough.
Right.
And now, like 30 something years later, like they've passed all these measures, and they were trying to push for 28 projects, new transit projects before 28. And the enlightened voters of Los Angeles County voted for all these measures, because then they got to a place where, like, yeah, this is a city where people do drive, but the convenience and the availability of choices and options was like significantly, it got to the point where even those that drove knew the value of having these other options. And I think things like athletics and stuff or events do catalyze people's interest in getting places in an alternative means.
Yeah.
And the fact that the stadium got closed right before we opened the Halava station is not lost on us. And it's just bad timing. And then, of course, people came at us like, again, dumb. You guys dumb. How you open this and no more even stadium?
Yeah, where are we going?
As if that
what's around here?
on us, right? But, we take it all in stride, right?
Right. Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest, my personal, not worry, but just something that it's almost like a trap. A BART system in San Francisco, it's primarily there. You take it out of the airport, and it's a one-time use. I have friends that use it somewhat.
Yeah.
But it's not New York, and it's definitely not England, and it's nowhere else. Really, that even parts of like Paris, I feel like we'd always kind of get on the subway and whatnot. And so, but I do want to kind of just take a break here. Thank you for being here. Like, really good conversations, and I know you're really busy, and this is great. If you're listening, thank you so much for being here. Drop a comment in the comment section. Share this, because there's a lot of things that I'm sure you're wondering, and there's people around you that probably have the same questions. Again, I'm Josh here with Sit Down Hawaii. Thank you so much. Hey, hope you're having a good time on the podcast. Wanted to take a quick break to bring today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is Sweet Life Tea. It's a tea that helps people get through anxiety. Listen, I have anxiety flying, I have anxiety kind of in a lot of areas, and it was something that was affecting me. And so I found this tea. It has organic, natural, vegan, non-GMO ingredients that when you put them all together, it just helped me relax. So there's things like chamomile, licorice root, lavender, and I felt like I wanted to bring you something that helped me. So if you're struggling with anxiety and you just need something to kind of relax that's organic, go ahead and go to sweetlifetea.com. Put in the code SitDownHawaii for 10% off. Okay, looking forward to the rest of the podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. We are Sit Down Hawaii podcast, where we talk about topics that you want to hear about. Today I've got John with me from DTS, Department of Transportation Services. Department Transportation Services. Yeah. Listen, we just cranked a little bit, a lot on rail and HART and Skyline. I want to just open up just briefly about the other things going on. Bikes, bike lanes, the integration between the new Bikis with the bus, and then also future. What I've seen some crazy stuff. So Elon Musk launched some things. You got Amazon now using drones to deliver things. Like, what does the future kind of look like?
So our North Star, right? And funny, the North Star in Hawaiian is Hokupa'a. And that's actually the name of our Joint Traffic Management Center on Alapa'i Street. It sits kind of like, kind of silently right there, but there's so much going on in that 24/7 facility. But a lot of that is going to come back to that. What we know about transportation, how we are future facing. We're about to replace all the traffic controllers on island and actually with the state DOT statewide that are actually getting us ready for connected autonomous vehicles.
Oh,
And to
wow.
think about it, I'm not to harp and focus specifically on Skyline, but Skyline is a level 4 autonomous vehicle. And I think a lot of people would be suspicious of cars driving themselves, but we're getting ourselves ready on all of our signals so that not only can the cars talk to the signal, but the signal can talk to the cars. And that will get us ready for that Elon Musk type or anybody, any kind of autonomous vehicle to operate on our roadways when that technology is mature and more importantly, when it is safe. And I think there's a lot, like there's two camps, right? People are like, yeah, autonomous vehicles will save the world. And I agree, we'll get better throughput. But there are still things that autonomous vehicles don't replace. And there are those who are very suspicious, of any kind of autonomous vehicle. And to that crowd, I'd say, when you get on a bus or more, when you get on an airplane or when you sit in the backseat of a car,
Right.
do you have any control over the outcome of how that vehicle is going to be operated? And the answer is no. So you're already, to everybody's level, you're already experiencing a certain level of autonomous vehicles, whether a human or a computer is going to be making that decision for you. So we have to be ready, and we are going to be ready. And when you talk about all the things that exist on our street, we talked about complete streets earlier. We have to make sure that our future is ready for bikes. And we have a lot of work going on with e-bikes right now.
Yeah.
And anything that gets thrown, like one wheels, electric skateboards, those kinds of, deck
Yeah.
with the big wheel and electric foot scooters and anything that is going to come into our market right now is mobility. I think that's why we have a focus on mobility now. And all those things have to be sorted out and have to operate cohesively, but most importantly, safely on our streets. And I think if you think about it, people who drive, right, their attention is compromised by so many things. And I would absolutely say that I think people are so distracted now when they drive.
Yeah.
That we've come to new levels of diminishing safety. And I say that as I know we've had our 40th traffic fatality on our roadway. And having a Vision Zero program where we don't find that one, where we strive for zero, but not even one death is tolerable for us, right? And we're at 40 near the end of the year. But, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but I just got tapped by a car as I was crossing the street to come here for this interview and for this podcast. And I think the woman was not paying attention to the signals because she was looking at her phone. And, I didn't get hurt. I just got touched by the car. But I think about it, we're going to be fighting more with distraction. I think generationally, as the youth who are used to like retreating into their devices, I can't imagine them like boosting up their attention potential to operating a vehicle safely or as less distracted as we have in the past. And I think that's all going to head for a crack up to the situation that we have right now is that how do we enforce safety on our roadways? And I think all the technology we have is maybe helping, maybe hurting, but we have to find a way that we can use all this technology to its greatest potential so that we have safer outcomes on our roadways. And that is job one.
Yeah, what was it, Vision Zero? If you take a look at it and you really dive deep, a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of resources was put into, and I encourage you as a listener, go look it up. You can find it. It's a big document. So, maybe go through, there was a presentation that it was a community presentation that kind of broke down the gist of what's going on. But, it has facts, figures of what's going on, pedestrians, bikes, cars. And I agree with you. One death is too many. And so we always want to fight for that. And there's always a margin of error in humans, right? Like we just inherently make dumb decisions. And I'm going to put myself in that category,
Me too.
right? I make the dumbest decisions. But yeah, I think the approach to what we're doing, I got maybe just some rapid fire like thoughts. Is that cool?
Shoot.
Let me know. Okay.
Is this like lightning round?
Yeah, I guess so.
All
Yeah,
right,
we don't
all
do
right.
that here, but hey, lightning round.
All right.
The boat. I
Yeah.
took the boat.
Yeah.
Okay, so Kapolei, we'd go to Campbell, we'd go to Aloha Tower. Loved it. Is there any option? Okay, and then I want to preface this. Super Ferry, Paul. And I don't know what that looks like. I think I just read something that they're putting the money to take out the last super ferry harbor in Kauai or something like that. I don't know. I just read that the other day. But when we were in Australia,
Yeah.
Sydney, it's common, man. You can go from Sydney to Bondi it's big boats, bro. It's not this like small. It's like ships.
Yep.
Where are we at with that? Any other opportunities? Is that ever going to happen where we can travel around island through water or even inner island through water?
I would actually have to. That's not really in. Well, we did operate the boat, and I think we knew we were going to operate that as a slower alternative to actually even the bus. But again, sometimes it's not about speed, but it's about choice. But in that case, the time versus the cost and the subsidy was just too far for us to bear, and I think that's generally going to be the case here. I mean, I think we've studied the heck out of it on the state level too, and a cost viable ferry system is really not. I mean, people can talk conspiracy theory about airlines and lobbyists and all that kind of stuff, but when it comes down to it, is the state or any municipality that wants to have a ferry is going to have to subsidize the heck out of it, far greater than what we would substitute for regular transit.
Okay, in the light of rapid fire, and super ferry is not you, so I shouldn't have any questions
That's
on
fair.
that. Yeah, it's okay. So I thought I don't know. Maybe you can debunk this. Super ferry was stopped because of environmental measures with the corals and the reefs.
I think that was a means by which to stop it, but there was, and because of that, I think people made the accusation that it didn't. We like not we, but collective we as a state maybe didn't go through as much process in gathering community input, which you saw when people lined up at Kauai and tried to block it from coming in, and actually were successful at that. But I also think that we as a populace need to get to a better place in understanding what the process is, so that we don't end up lying down in front of bulldozers or ships or other things when that moment was way far back in time. Engage. We have to learn how to engage. We have to learn how to engage meaningfully, and as government too, we have to learn how to engage meaningfully, such that we meet people halfway and we understand the issues. It's kind of like I said earlier, like if I don't know something, and please tell me, help educate me on something that I don't know because I haven't experienced it. And I think that's where we really need to lean on, get off of the suspicions of government, or even for government to get off the suspicions of people who are against the things that we want to do or that we're aspiring to do, and get us to a better place of understanding. Achieving understanding, I think, is key to doing anything. And not everybody's going to agree with everything, but we have to at least try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Flying cars.
Yeah.
Where are we? I saw. This was on Instagram, so I don't know how factual it is, but there was like a car that you can. It's like $1 million. It does hover. It does fly. Are we close to even having any of this in Hawaii, or how do we even maintain? I think of like what is that movie? The Fifth Element.
Yeah.
It's like cars going up and down, like.
Or even Back to the Future.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Back to the Future. So more Back to the Future. I guess. What is that? Is that even something we're thinking of? What's going on?
I don't think so, but I will say, prove me wrong. I hope to be wrong. If there is something we can do with the space of autonomy, I almost don't trust our people to drive in like on 2 axes. Like if you're just talking about forward, left, right, back, hard enough before you add an altitude up and down.
Yeah.
And I can't see a human piloted thing, and you're not gonna go take driver's ed class in high school to learn about that. I think it's hard enough for people to drive a car right now.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
But if I'm wrong, then hey, I don't mind saying I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think you would have to get like a pilot's license or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Put in hours or whatever that.
But
looks
again,
like.
if technology gets us to that point, I mean, as a transportation guy, I gotta responsibly think about what innovations are we going to see this generation, and I think the autonomous vehicle is going to be that generation. But there are caveats to it too. I mean, there's space and utilization, and it doesn't solve the highway issue that we have, where we built highways that have segmented communities, and we don't have space to build more highways.
Yeah. Okay, rapid fire. You've talked about the difference between traffic and congestion, and I really, I think that's a really important distinction.
Yeah.
Traffic is, in the way that you put it, again, I don't want to frame your words, but it's good. Traffic can be good.
Yeah, we got places to go. We got people to see. We got business to
Right.
do. Traffic is great. Like you want a business that has a lot of traffic.
Right. So traffic is an indicator of business and growth. We want that.
Prosperity.
Yep.
Yeah.
Congestion is
Soul
opposite.
sapping,
Yeah.
makes you dread moving around.
Yep.
Congestion is the thing. It's the poison.
Cry on Red Hill on the way home
Right.
west.
Right.
So
Everybody who goes west, they got to make that decision. Yeah, I'm gonna go Viaduct or I'm gonna go Red Hill.
if it's 2:15, 2:17, forget it.
Yeah.
Might as well just stay. Hit Moku, get the happy
That's no
hour,
way to
get some
live.
chicken
There is
wings.
no way to live, right? But
Yeah.
we do it.
Yeah, we do. And
Remember that? You remember that thing? I would get on H1 at 3:15 p.m. for you. That's how much I love you.
That's how much I love it. Yeah, it really is this, and I hate to say this, but okay, I feel for my family. I have family in Macau.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Nobody can complain. I mean, that's far.
yeah. So Macau, right? And it's like for them, it's what traffic at what point? Because they're like, okay, we hit the Red Hill all the way to Waikele traffic.
Yeah.
Then now we're hitting it Water Park to Nanakuli traffic, right? And so it's we build this in our life. Like it's just a way of life. And so
Let me say this though. I used to live in Mililani, right? Some days I could get home in 29 minutes, depending on when I left.
Right.
Some days it took an hour and a half. Some
Right.
days it took 2. That variability is what we cannot stand. It makes
Right.
us miss picking up our kids. It makes us it takes away time that we would spend doing other things.
Right.
And I feel like if you lived far and you knew that the drive was the same every day,
Yeah.
you could budget in the time for that.
of course,
The variability you cannot plan a life around.
It's
much
really hard.
less your life and your family's life.
right.
And that's when that anxiety creeps in, right? That soul sapping, like, I better leave now because I don't know how it's gonna be.
right.
So I think that's where if we had better predictability on this island, and we don't, because maybe this is soapbox, but everybody's action when you're on the freeway, if you drive irresponsibly for 1 second and cause something, I think every minute equates to 15 minutes of delay. So you know that if you hit somebody, you're not gonna just be blocking traffic for 1 minute.
Yeah, it's like an hour. Yeah.
So you think about all the thousands of people that use that same roadway. What you just did to all those people, we gotta start caring a little bit more and be responsible for our own actions.
Yeah. I don't know if we can get really deep into it, but here's what I do know is that it's not gotten easier. It's not gotten better. I just read a fact that the average person in the west side, I think it was Kapolei, so that's not even like fully west, right?
Yeah.
On average, spends 60 hours a year in traffic, right? So that's 2 days, 2.5 days, right?
And that's Kapolei.
Yeah, that's crazy.
We have far many people that live beyond Kahe.
yeah,
And
exactly.
that's where they have to go through one more gauntlet,
Yeah.
right? And again, I feel for anybody who doesn't have a predictable commute.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's the roughest.
So I guess rapid fire. This was a big question. Why can't we get the zipper lane to go the opposite way?
I actually don't know. That's a state
Okay.
Department of Transportation highways, state highway. Actually, I don't have an answer for that, but I should know maybe. Yeah.
I don't know. Okay, cool. Okay. I don't think I have any other questions. I want to give you a second. What can we do from where you're at
Yeah.
to move Hawaii forward in transportation? And I want to preface this. If we were to do one thing, it would make our lives in Hawaii better. What is it from your point of view that we can do?
I think we need to think beyond the habits that we have right now. And we need to put different people's shoes on. So, for example, we want to put in a bike lane. We get a whole bunch of blowback. I think putting in bike lanes are about as controversial as putting in a rail system.
Really?
Yeah, because the people that are against it think that they're never going to use a bike, and maybe that's true. But you see that deflection, because when we say we're putting in a sidewalk, nobody flips out about a sidewalk. Everybody thinks sidewalks are great,
Right.
right? But nobody wants to extend themselves into the shoes of people they think they're never going to be, right? And nobody thinks about that in terms of highways. Like, we all paid to build H3. There's some people who never use H3, but we paid to build it. So, I mean, I don't know why that's different than us paying to build Skyline, even though people say they'll never use it. That's fine too. But that's just the way government is. And so we have to do what's best for people. Sometimes we have to lead. We have to push into new areas, because otherwise we'll get nailed with the same thought about, you guys don't plan anything. You guys don't think about innovation. You guys don't think about anything new. And yet when we try to do new things, it's hard to get people to come along. So put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And I think that's how we get to greater understanding about what the blind spots that we all have. Because again, habits, right? We do the same thing every day. We know the ins and outs of how that works.
Right.
But you don't challenge yourself. Again, and I say put down one excuse a day and try something different. And I think you'll get to a different place of understanding or a different place of success.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. So you're busy. I'm busy. We got to go. However, I do hope when this rail gets to the airport, I would love to, please consider coming back.
Oh, yeah.
I want to talk about what does that look like, where are we at, and just kind of get a measuring stick of how far we've come. Thank you so much, John, for being here. It really means a lot.
Time.
Thank you so much. Hey, listen, you're here at Sit Down Hawaii podcast, and it means a lot that you're here. Please share this. I do think that we as Hawaii need to spend our time wisely learning about the things that are really happening in our communities, and transportation is huge. You have the opportunity to we collectively can make our lives better if we just think about one another a little more. So with that, I'm Josh. Take care. Aloha.